For the first time in history, a supersonic fighter jet was shot down by an unmanned surface vessel, so a naval drone. Ukraine managed to achieve this, and we even have a video of the shootdown, but we'll talk about this as well as about anything else that has happened along the front lines and behind them in this situation report about the war in Ukraine. Ukraine struck the Murom instrument making plant in Vladimir Oblast. Among the products it is making are fuses, so a military target. The drone attack, according to Ukrainian sources, has hit 2 buildings. A fire has started. The exact amount of damage is unknown to me. Another Ukrainian attack struck the Crimean Peninsula with naval drones and air drones. According to the reports, both local ones as well as Ukrainian ones, several airfields have been hit. The amount of damage, though, is unconfirmed on the ground. Russia itself strikes Ukraine as well, and I have the numbers. We have 108 drones, 72 intercepted in one strike. Exactly 1/3 made it through. In another strike, 30 in the night from the 30th of April to the 1st of May, 5 Iskander-M, the ballistic missiles, were used, as well as 170 drones. 142 were intercepted, 16% success rate. And in a third strike, 150 drones were used and 126 were intercepted, another 16%. The numbers remain fairly high, especially compared with roughly a year ago, but there is some kind of option at least, because the Ukrainians have reported that the Russians increasingly have started to use decoys in those strikes. If Ukraine has found a way to differentiate between the decoys and the real strike drones, then obviously it could be at least a theoretical possibility that some of those drones that are not being intercepted are simply being ignored because they are not dangerous. Even though that seems to be very unlikely, it's more likely that those are actually drones that were meant to be intercepted, where Ukraine has been unsuccessful. We also have news about the Ukrainian journalist Victoria Roshchina, who disappeared in 2023. Her body was now given back to the Ukrainians, and she had her eyes and her brain removed. Her throat was also removed. She showed signs of torture. According to that, she was tortured to death by the Russians after she actually investigated that very thing, torture by the Russians. We'll switch to the developments along the front line, and we start in the Sumy region, where Ukraine is fighting with the Russians, both inside of Ukraine as well as in Russia. First of all, we have the Russians reaching the border at this point here. On the exact border, the Ukrainians have been pushed back, so in this regard, this area here is likely now under Russian control and no longer a gray zone. Further south, the Ukrainians have actually entered Kursk in a new region, in a new area. We have them here. They are being shelled they're being shelled by the Russians inside of Russian territory. The advance is negligible, to be perfectly honest. This is an advance of 400 meters, 250, something in this ballpark. So this is not a significant advance, but it's inside of Russia here as well. But that's all I have from the Sumy region. We switch to Kharkiv and nothing has changed there. We switch to the Eastern Front, and while the fighting is continuing at various parts of the front line, I only have changes from the Liman direction. First of all, the Russians have advanced north of Torske. They have reached down here to the ponds here at the Sherebets. We have them right here at the inside the houses. This should be Torske as well, or it's Sarichne. I'm not exactly sure about this, but we have the Russians at this point. And 2 days later, I have geolocations from here as well as from here. So probably not only have the Russians reached this point, but they've probably pushed in the Ukrainians' positions in this area here as well. A battalion commander in place here in Liman is saying that the Russians will use the ceasefire to create a pontoon bridge over the Sherebets, so probably in this area to allow them to resupply if there's a ceasefire. And this is one of the examples why short ceasefires that are simply announced and not negotiated are very problematic, as one side, as both sides can use them to improve their situations, and some sides can improve it disproportionately. If there's a 3-day ceasefire, the Russians could immediately put a pontoon bridge here and send tons of supplies here. They could even send armored vehicles, and then they could even remove the pontoon bridge afterwards, so it can't be destroyed. This shows why usually ceasefires have long negotiations before it, at times weeks before they even start, to prevent things like this, as this would give one side a disproportionate advantage. South of the Seversky Donetsk, we continue and we have the Russians advancing in Ryhorivka. We had them recently in those houses here. They have advanced by roughly 100 meters west towards Ryhorivka, as this is a geolocation that's from a later point. Unless that's a video that is being published only a few days later after the first one, it would indicate that the Russians are still in Ryhorivka or are there again saying that all of this here probably has to be at the very least a contested area, if not parts of it are already solidly under Russian control. We talked about it in the past that the gray zones have massively extended. This could be here as well, but it's definitely no longer an area solidly under Ukrainian control. This was here in Ryhorivka, but we have a second Ryhorivka here at Chasiv Yar, right to the north of it. The Russians also advanced. Nothing important, as it's a tiny advance if we want it this way. They have reached a little bit further to the west here inside of the forest. That's it, what we have from the Chasiv Yar area. And other than that, the Ukrainians are reporting the Russians are sending additional reserves to that area. Most attacks are on foot, at times 10 kilometers distance, where the Russians have to walk. Only rarely do the Russians use heavy equipment, heavy vehicles, basically as a taxi to bring in infantry to then withdraw. But it's mostly on foot, up to 10 kilometers in walking, and all of this obviously under drone threat. Further south in the Donetsk region, we have the Russians in Cherbenivka, where they have seemingly been advanced towards the northwest, or at least have been recently geolocated here a little further south than recently. But overall, this is mostly being reported as a contested area. So to which degree this is them pushing back the Ukrainians or not, I cannot confirm at this point, but it's a more northern position than we had for a while. Further to the west in the Pokrovsk region, the Russians have advanced here along the road towards Konstantinivka. We have the Russians in the town of Novolenivka here. Geolocation shows us that they are actually inside the center of Novolenivka. This is here on the map. So the Russians have actually pushed significantly further north than being seen here on the map. Further Russian advances. The Russians have also, and that is sensational, entered Pokrovsk. We have a geolocation of Russian soldiers here in the first houses in Pokrovsk. The situation there is unclear. Right now, there are some pro-Ukrainian sources, as well as even Russian mill bloggers, saying it was a DRG, a diversion reconnaissance group. Some claim they might have gotten lost there, but there's a new report that they might still be there, but they have not consolidated their position. So there might still be Russian soldiers that are alive, but they have not consolidated their position. Reaching these houses is actually not new. We had that probably half a year ago already. It's just one open field away from the no man's land or from the Russian positions that have been in Shevchenko, Selene and Novi Trud for quite a while. So if one side is falling asleep and the other one crosses through, it's quite possible that they reach Pokrovsk for a second time. At this moment, I cannot say whether the Russians actually managed to push through and gain a foothold here. According to what I'm being told, this is not the case, but we'll see fairly soon. They have actually been confirmed to have reached this point, and there are some pro-Ukrainian sources that are well connected claiming that the Russians are still there, or at least yesterday have still been there. As said, we'll have to observe it in the future. That's the best we can do now. Further to the west in Udachne, we have the Russians advancing a tiny bit. We have them now here at this point, and on the map, this is here. So yeah, maybe they advanced 50 meters, or this is still being considered contested, so unclear, but at least they are further to the west than recently, so it's still worth reporting. Further south in the direction of Novopavlivka, more or less, we have the Russians, we had the Russians in front of Bahatia, here on the road in a geolocation. And 2 days later, geolocation from today, the geolocation shows them in the southeastern part of Bahatia. So they have reached the town. To which degree they gained a foothold there is unclear yet, but that would mean that the line of communication into the rest of Constantinople, where there might still be Ukrainian soldiers, is cut, to which unless of course they cross the river here. But a wheeled transport seems to be out of the question. To my knowledge, I do not have any knowledge whether Constantinople is already evacuated, but I would expect it to be not that the Ukrainian presence inside of Constantinople is not for much longer. Further southwest, we have the Russians south of Vilnepole. Recently, I've shown you that they were in Vilnepole. Now we have them at this position here, if I remember correctly. Here, at this point, it's actually, yeah, it's this one, I think. So we have the Russians basically advancing towards the west from their recent position. The Russians also have been spotted at close to Mali Shcherbaki. Here they reached positions that were not where they had no presence yet here, but according to what I see, they are being taken out by the Ukrainians. Interesting part here is that the Russians are using perfidy. They use blue armbands, that's the Ukrainian IFF symbol, basically indicating that they are Ukrainians, to get a chance to get closer to the Ukrainians. That should be considered perfidy, especially as it's an established sign for the Ukrainians. But in this case, at least, it was not successful. The Ukrainians managed to see them. The big news for today, though, is what has happened along the on the Black Sea. We have here Riba itself confirming it, that a Sukhoi 30 was shot down by the Ukrainians from an unmanned surface vessel, basically a naval drone. And we even have a video of it happening where not too much is visible, to be honest, but we see the plane flying here, and that's where it's already hit, and afterwards the piece is just dropping down. According to the Russians, the drone, the pilots managed to bail out and got rescued by civilian sailors, so they are alive, but the plane is lost. This is a world's first. This is the first time a supersonic jet was shot down by a naval drone. The Ukrainians used a short-range air-to-air missile, infrared guided, that we've seen in the past being mounted on USVs. Here, in this case, it was successful. They managed to shoot down a Russian jet. In January, February, March, and April, Russia has gained 1,627 square kilometers, according to the ISW. 496 in January, 313 in February, 601 in March, and 217 in April. March this much because of the collapse in Kursk. To which degree it was the reason is in the US. Whether or not it's because the US stopped intel sharing or not is unclear. I've read from Ukrainian soldiers that they say this wasn't the issue. We had our logistics problems were so massive that it was just a question of time, but it at least happened at the same time. But as said, according to Ukrainian observers, it was probably not the Americans' fault, but this led to the success, to the high number of the Russians in March. In total, if we believe the Ukrainian numbers, I've spoken a lot about it in the past, that we need to take numbers by war participants even more with a grain of salt than otherwise. But according to the Ukrainian numbers, this is 99 soldiers lost for each square kilometer. In September to December, the Russians only lost 59, according to the Ukrainian numbers. So the Russian losses would have increased by more than a third, no, by more than half since last year, and while the Russians have not advanced faster. Russia is keeping up the momentum with soldiers of low quality, but this is nothing new either. The Russians are simply using cannon fodder here to keep the initiative on their side. We have news about partisans and sabotage and espionage here. We have the Russians who tried to kill Serhiy Sternenko. He is a drone activist. I don't know how you would call it. He had organized at least 176,000 drones for the Ukrainian military. He's involved in developments too, according what I've read, and somebody tried to kill him. A woman, according to reports, that was hired by the Russians, even got an apartment in the same building to have a chance and observed him for weeks. And we even have a video of it happening. Let me quickly do it in the usual speed, and we can see him get out of the house. And here she starts to fire and actually seems to be not successful even at the short distance, where she's being overwhelmed and then being captured. That's not all though. In Greece, a Georgian citizen has been arrested for espionage for Russia. He used his job there he was there to report on weapon deliveries towards Ukraine in Alexandroupolis, to report to the Russians what weapons are being delivered and when. In troop generations for the Russian side, we have news from South Korea. The South Koreans are believing that North Korea has lost 600 KIA and 4,700 WIA in Kursk. That's actually a surprisingly low number of KIA and high number of WIA, especially in regards to the reports previously, according to which, even from the Russian side. So this was not Ukrainian propaganda, but even on the Russian side, it was, they don't, if they are wounded and can't make it back by themselves, they rather kill themselves. There were reports like this all the time. But according to the South Koreans, the number of WIA is extremely high compared to the KIA, probably much higher than the Russians, from what we've heard. But those are the numbers that the South Koreans believe to be true. North Korea, according to South Korea, has especially gained knowledge in regards to drone, and Russia is now helping the North Koreans with spy satellites, drones, and surface-to-air missiles. North Korea has in return also sent 15,000 workers to Russia. Russia has a critical shortage of working personnel, obviously also for its defense industry, but for the civilian sector as well. Here, North Korea is seemingly starting to aid the Russians, even though 15,000 workers are obviously just a drop in a bucket. Still, though, the military aid as well as the workers are violating UN Security Council resolutions in which Russia has previously signed off on those resolutions. In the political sphere, we have some news as well. The goal of the agreement between the United States and Ukraine is to allow for a reconstruction and a modernization in the long term of Ukraine. Russia is at the same time, this now according to new reports, Russia at the same time is still basically stopping any attempt to end the war unless it's through a Ukrainian capitulations. The Russians are against everything that is being offered to them, because they insist on a Ukrainian capitulation, and they are especially against peacekeepers that could actually be able to stop them. In regards to the victory parade in Moscow, the Slovakian Prime Minister Fico and the President of Serbia, Vučić, might not come. Both have basically reported to be sick. Also, the Kazakh president is now under question whether he's going to come after he learned that the FSB had started a smear campaign against his own son. This is obviously a little unpleasant if you're supposed to go there as a visitor of honor. At the same time, Zelensky has warned international participants to go to that parade, as the Ukrainians have not agreed to a ceasefire that would allow the Russians to do a parade without being interrupted. Ukraine, on the other hand, is offering a 30-day ceasefire, though. They say we can do a ceasefire, and if they want, we can start it on the 7th, which is also the 25th anniversary of Putin becoming president. Zelensky said we can do it, but it has to be for 30 days. It can't be just for the Russians to run their parade. We'll have to see if they agree to that. And the US have done a foreign military sale for $310 million for the support of F-16. It will include maintenance, training, equipment, and modifications to airplanes. So the next military sale going to Ukraine after the signing of the resource agreement. And there is rumors, claims that Zelensky said that 45 billion US dollars in aid are going to come from US aid are going to come. 30 billion this year, 15 billion next year. This would be more than in the past if this was true. In the past, over 3 years in total, there were 64 billion. So barely over 21 billion a year. In this case, with 45 billion, it would be more than previously, but I was looking for it. I've tried to find something more solid, and I have yet to find it. So I'm not sure whether that was Zelensky saying it in some speech that wasn't translated yet. I'm not sure if it's some internet rumor. It could be an invention. We'll have to see whether that's going to be true, whether this big amount of aid is going to come. According to that report, what I read, Zelensky said it would be the investment into the funds. We talked about it in the past. I think I made a video here, didn't I? At least I made it on the German channel. I hope I made it here as well. That the resource agreement would allow the US to basically invest in it with weapons deliveries. And according to that, that would be part of it already. But we'll have to see how that continues. At least that's it from me for now. And I have to thank once again Sam Garcia, because he decided to send me the Fuzileiros, Portuguese Marines in Africa, Iran-Iraq War, Volume 2 Convoy Battles, Iran-Iraq Naval War Convoy Battles, and he sent me Indo-Pakistan War of 1971 Volume 2. Sam, thank you so much once again. Thank you for your generosity. If you want to support the channel and send me a present too, you find the links in the description at this point. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. It helps with the algorithm. And if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. But that's it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.